I wrote The Primal Wound in 1993, I felt there was a real dearth of information about how a child was affected by the separation from the birth mother. And actually, when I first wrote it, it was a thesis for my master's degree in 1986. And it was after I had given a talk at the American Adoption Congress conference down in Garden City, California, that I had a lot of people telling me, you need to write this in a book because we need to outline it and absorb it, you know. And people need to know about this because a lot of people felt very understood when they heard me talking about the legacy of having been given up for adoption and being separated from the birth mother. I do believe that there's a little bit more awareness of that primal wound and how babies are affected by being separated from mother, and not just when they're adopted, but by being in incubators when they're first born, by having parents decide they're going on a 2-week vacation without the baby when it's 2 months old, or those kinds of things are going to affect the child because children that young, babies that young, don't understand about permanency. And so they are fearing that the mother is gone forever whenever she's gone. For adoptees, there's an extra thing that happens for them because not only does mother never come back, but they are put into a family where they may have very few traits in common. And so they have to, from the very beginning of their lives, begin to adapt to something that may not feel very congruous with what they feel inside. And so they have that first tremendous trauma of the separation from the birth mother. And then they have the ongoing kind of chronic trauma of trying to figure out how to be every day of their lives in that family. And I don't think people really understand very much about that. You know, as far as the parents are concerned, they love the child. They want the child to feel as if they're a member of the family. They consider them a member of the family. And they don't think very much about how different the child may really be. And I think part of that comes from our belief that the nature versus nurture kind of thing, where if we just nurture them in the right way, then they're going to be just like us. Well, of course, they do become more and more like us, but that means they become less and less maybe like themselves. Where is it that they can be both who they are genetically and who they are as far as their adaptation is concerned? Adaptation is something we all do to a certain extent anyway, but when you are living in a family where you don't see yourself reflected back at all, you really don't have the sense of oh, I'm okay to be me, and I'm okay, and I fit in. So there's all this trying to figure out how to fit. And of course, some families are better fits than others. Some children don't have to adapt nearly as much as other children do. But if you're in a family where you're so very different, and I've talked to adoptees who have been, it's just very difficult every day trying to figure out how to be in this family so that you won't have that same experience of being kicked out again or rejected again or whatever it is that they felt at the very beginning of their lives. I think there is a greater understanding now that people need to have information about themselves. As far as I'm concerned, I just feel it's a civil right. It's a human right, and I don't understand why everyone can't know who they are. I don't know why in this country it's taking us so long to get there, because I mean, everyone in the world has a right to know what their history is, what their ancestry is. You know, one adoptee said it well, and I don't know who it was, but she said she was talking to her adoptive parents, and she said, "Mom and Dad, yeah, you're my mom and dad, but your ancestors are not my ancestors." And this is the whole thing, you know? I mean, they love their grandparents, and, you know, on both sides of the family, and they love their cousins and their aunts and uncles and so forth, but it isn't their lineage. That piece of paper is a sociological, legal paper. It is not a biological or even a psychological paper, and it has nothing to do with biology or with the psychology of the child or of the person. So I just don't understand why we're taking so long and why we're so draconian about adoption records. I mean, most countries have done this a long time ago. It doesn't make it difficult for people when they're opened. It's not a big deal. You know, it's not as if everybody's going to say, well, my adoptive parents aren't my parents anymore or anything like that. So I don't know why it's so difficult for people to get that. I mean, when you talk to people one-on-one, and you explain to them how it's important for people to know who they are, they understand it right away. I've never had anybody argue with me about that. They say, well, of course it is. Of course people should know who they are. But when you get it into the legislature or something, then you have a bunch of lawyers talking about it, and they have all kinds of difficulty with it. One of the things that they keep talking about is the confidentiality that they promise birth mothers. No birth mother I've ever talked to has ever been promised anything. They have been threatened and told, now the family has a new family and they aren't going to want to hear from you, so don't go bothering them sometime down the road. You know, and so many of them are afraid to search because that every time they think about it, they sink back into their 16-year-old place and think about how they're not supposed to do that. And it's ridiculous. They weren't promised confidentiality. They were told that they weren't supposed to interfere with the new family. Somatic memory traces have to do with the body. That's the body reaction to certain kinds of emotions. As we know, the body and the mind and our spirit and so forth are not that disconnected as we have been led to believe in the past. It is all part of one big system within us. So if you have a trauma in your life, it creates a certain kind of chemistry in your body to which the physical parts of your body react. And there are all kinds of things that happen as a result of trauma. A person can become sick to their stomach, they can get headaches, they can have certain kinds of skin disorders. All of these things can be a result of an emotional or traumatic experience. So somatic traces have to do with the kinds of things that how the body reacts to trauma or other kinds of emotional upheavals. A baby who is kept with the mother after birth is going to have a very different experience than the baby who's separated from her and has no idea where she went. So those neurological connections are going to be very different in those two babies. Well, what happens when these neurological things get imprinted in our, these expressions and experiences get imprinted in our neurological system is that we keep reacting to them over and over again, even when they aren't happening in the present. I mean, things remind us. It takes a very small reminder to have us respond to an old trigger. And so a lot of adoptees, for instance, feel rejected very easily. I mean, if someone looks at them the wrong way, they feel as if they're being rejected because that triggers that old rejection they felt by mother when she just disappeared. A lot of school children, if their moms don't pick them up right away from school, will feel as if she's not coming back. Now, other kids don't feel that way. They just feel mom's late again, so what? But a child who's experienced that very beginning of life when they were left will keep thinking that that's going to happen over and over again. And the most, let's say, frustrating part of that whole thing about memory is that the implicit memory, which is a memory that we don't recall, but is always there. The things that happen that first year of life when we don't have explicit memory, those things have a great deal to do with our emotional responses, with our sense of ourself and others, with the way we see the world, with our attitudes about the world and others. And yet we don't remember at all what it is that happened. How many adoptees remember the moment that mom left? No, they just know something was missing. And of course, all babies know their own mother, so they know that whoever was there afterwards wasn't the same person. And it makes a difference to them.